word theos. It's used about 1,320 times for the Father and 2 times for Jesus. 13 occurrences would be 1%.
And those 2 times, are they at the beginning of John?
No, they're in John 20:28 and Hebrews 1:8. The interesting thing is that in both contexts, we have John 20:17, where there's my God, there's a God above Jesus, and in Hebrews 1:9, there's a God above Jesus as well. So in both places he's called God, there's a secondary sense that he's called God.
But that theos, isn't that big G or little g, can be translated either way?
Doesn't matter. It could be fake gods.
Okay.
Could be. There's another word, theos, which means goddess. You know, 2 Corinthians 4:4, Satan is called God. God of this world. I should have done that. I should have brought you in the major Greek lexicon under the reference for God. It gives you all the different ways that it's used, and like it says, it's used some places for judges, some places for good people. The average person in the first century, if you would ask them who is God, they would say it's the Roman emperor. That's who they would have said. The average person. So it's a very, very flexible word, and we don't use it that way today. Who is God? Oh, he's the God that's reigning in heaven. That's all we use it for. To call anyone else God is just.
When you go to Thailand, they'll tell you the king is God.
Yeah. In North Korea, they'll do it too. So. All right. Let's knock this out here. Chapter 9, only 41 verses.
Hallelujah.
Arabian horses.
Then I really won't be able to focus.
I don't know what you are.
Arabian horses.
All right. If we get done reading, or we can get out of here. Are we on? We're good? All right. Let's start here, chapter 9.
As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made a little clay from the spittle and applied the clay to his eyes, and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sin. So he went away and washed and came back seeing. Therefore the neighbors and those who previously saw him as a beggar were saying, is not this one the one who used to sit and beg? Others were saying, this is he. So others were saying, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the one. So they were saying to him, how then were your eyes opened?
He answered, the man who is called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. They brought to the Pharisees the man who was formerly blind. Now it was the Sabbath on the day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also were asking him again how he received sight. And he said to them, he applied clay to my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees were saying, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath. But others were saying, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, what do you say about him, since he opened your eyes? And he said, he is a prophet. The Jews then did not believe it of him that he had been blind and had received sight, until they called the parents of the very one who had received his sight, and questioned him, saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then how does he now see? His parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But how he sees now we do not know, or who opened his eyes we do not know. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, or the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed him to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. For this reason his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So a second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God, we know that this man is a sinner." He said to them, "Whether he is a sinner I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." So they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I already told you, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you not want to become his disciples too, do you?" They reviled him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he is from." The man answered and said to them, "Well, here is an amazing thing, that you do not know where he is from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears them. Since the beginning of time, it has never been heard that anyone who opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and are you teaching us?" So they put him out.
Jesus heard that they had put him out, and finding him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have both seen him, and he is the one who is talking to you." And he said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. And Jesus said, "For judgment I came into the world, so that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind." Those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and said to him, "We are not blind too, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin, but since you say we see, your sin remains."
Okay. Lots of interesting points we can pull out of here. So he sees a guy that's blind from birth. What day did this happen on, by the way?
Sabbath.
Okay, again, Jesus is deliberately healing someone on the Sabbath here. Except for telling this guy to take up his pallet and walk, what does he do to him?
Put some clay, makes him go
Yeah, he
do
like
something.
mixes a bunch of clay up and does it. If you still have your reference there, your mission reference on page 106, where it listed the 40 minus 1 different ways of working. On the third line, it says sifting and kneading, Kneading. Kneading is not necessarily a word that I use every day in my language, so I Googled it in dictionary.com. You know what kneading is? To work with dough, clay, etc. into a uniform mixture by processing, folding, and stretching. You know what Jesus did there? He deliberately broke the Sabbath again in order to heal a guy. Deliberately. See that? But again, he's making the point. The value of human beings is more important than ritual observance. That's what that's the point that he's making. And of course, at this point, they get very upset. Okay. Now, the last time he healed somebody, he told the guy, "Don't sin any longer so that nothing worse happens to you." With the implication that maybe something bad happened to him, but he's been that way his whole life, so maybe something happened to his parents. So the disciples reasonably conclude, verse 2, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now I've heard sermons on this where people said they were just judging the guy. But that's really a logical conclusion they could have come up with. And Jesus doesn't chastise them for coming to that conclusion, but he just says, it wasn't any of these things there, so that God can work through him. Notice in verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me. Is it we as in Jesus and the disciples, or we as the Johannine community that Jesus is speaking on behalf of? Did you catch the other one in verse 31? We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him. This is just Jesus speaking. You've got this plural pronoun there again. Keeps showing up there. I want to point it out to you. You'll see it. It's not just a gospel that is objectively telling things. It's the community of John speaking to this Jewish community and trying to convince them. And of course, this is one of the main chapters that brings all that stuff out. All right. Of course, Jesus, as the light of the world, is bringing light to this guy. Bringing clarity in more ways than one because he's blind. So he spat on the ground, made clay. He did his kneading, washed in the pool of Siloam. Do you remember Siloam already coming up? Siloam is where the waters are supposed to come from in the and the Feast of Booths. It shows up in your reference there in the Mishnah.
Churning waters?
Sorry?
The waters that were churned by the angels?
Yeah, no, that's the different. That's the pool of Bethsaida. Okay. In the Feast of Booths, the priest is supposed to go and get particular water from the pool of Siloam as a way of celebrating the ceremony. Okay. Jesus says, you want to be, healed? Go get the water, and I'm going to do it for you. Okay. Otherwise, the pool of Siloam is a pointless reference to it. It's interesting. All right. Washed, and he came back. And they say, the people, the neighbors, they say, this isn't the guy that used to sit and beg. Others were like, yeah, that's him. No, it's not like him. But he, the blind man, kept saying, I am he, I am the one. The Greek is there. Ego and me. Okay, is he saying, I am Yahweh?
No.
Obviously not. He's saying, I am the one that you're talking about. So even ego and me doesn't mean that.
Where's that?
Verse 9.
Okay.
This is okay.
Yeah, I am he. John 9. What verse? Sorry.
9.
9. He repeatedly was saying that, there go me. I am he. Not but once. He repeatedly was saying this. He was saying it. The imperfect. How was it that your eyes were open? The man who is called Jesus, that's how he interpreted the healing of Jesus. He called a man, verse 11. He made clay, he anointed my eyes. He said, go to Siloam and do this. Where is he? We don't know. Okay? We've got to get Jesus because he's telling you to do work. He's encouraging sinful behavior. And we know what to do with those sinful behaviors. All right? And then it was brought to the Pharisees. Okay? So it's not so much the Jews now. The Jews are now specifically defined as the Pharisees. You have to understand that after the year 70, all the different groups of all the different Jewish groups that could have been available. If you wanted to be a Jew, there's all the different ways that you could express your Judaism. You could be a Pharisee. You could be a Sadducee. You could be an Essene. Those are the people that wrote the DSS, which means
Dead Sea
Dead Sea
Scrolls.
Scrolls. Okay. You could be a zealot, which is what Josephus calls the fourth philosophy, because it's the fourth one. Someone who just says, we don't like Roman rule, and whenever we have a chance, we're going to stab these guys in the back and revolt and start mobs and try to get rid of Rome, whatever violent ways that we can. You got the disciples of J-Bap. Who's that?
John
the Baptist. And then you got the disciples of Jesus. Okay, I would say within the year 30, all 6 of these options are on the table. By the year 70, the temple's destroyed, so there are no more Sadducees because their base of operations of the temple. All the Essenes went out to fight in the war, and they were all killed. The Zealots who basically started this war, they were all killed. The disciples of John the Baptist has been dead for 40 years. They're not following him around. You get the disciples of Jesus, and you have the Pharisees. These are the guys that after the year 70, they are the ones that took over Judaism. All right? You understand that? They're the only ones that were left. They're like, we win by default. So the Jews that are attacking the Johannine community are really Pharisees right here. So it's 2 groups. You have the disciples of Jesus and the Pharisees.
Well, weren't there other false messiahs where you could have been a disciple of too? Like during...
Yeah, but they didn't have their own little particular group, their own little sect. These are actually, they have their own sect. S-E-C-T. Even in the book of Acts, it says that it calls them. There are different sects there, different groups that you can join. And not every single Jew, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, wasn't a member of any of these right here. I guess she eventually became a disciple of Jesus. But if you wanted to join a particular group and you wanted to have a say-so in it, those are all the options that are on the table. It's like, how many different Christian denominations do we have today? Like more than this. It's actually incorrect to say Judaism as a singular thing in the first century. Scholars are actually saying the better way to say it is Judaisms, more than one. And I think if they're saying that, how can we call Christianity a single thing? We really have Christianities. So, you get a little bit more sense of who are the opponents of Jesus and the Johannine community. You got the Pharisees here. And they're saying, now it was the Sabbath on the day, this is verse 14, that he made the clay, that he was doing his kneading. He opened the eyes. They're asking how he regained his sight. Some of the Pharisees were saying, this man is not from God. Jesus, the guy who did it, he's not from God. Now why are they saying it? Because he does not keep the Sabbath. So because Jesus would do all these healings that he wasn't supposed to, that made him an illegitimate prophet from God. So therefore, if he's not from God, he's from the devil, he is a demon, he's a Samaritan, all these different things. These are the excuses they're making. Others of the Pharisees were saying, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? They're like, they see the signs, and they know that they're real, legitimate. They're like, but he's a sinner. How could he do this here? Okay? And there's a division among them. Remember we listed all those verses about a division? Here's another one. Is 9:16. There's a division because of the miracles of Jesus. So they said to the blind man, what do you say about him since he opened your eyes? And he said, he's a prophet. You know, that's what they're saying. Now, of course, if you, yeah, he could be. Yeah, I mean, whether it's the prophet, but he's just a prophet. He could be anyone who speaks or teaches on behalf of God. Verse 18, the Jews did not believe it of him that he had been blind and received sight until they called the parents of the very one who he had received his sight. You know, if it's almost like they thought, well, he must have faked his miracle. It was a hoax. Like Jesus is just faking things. Like he's one of the accusations of Jesus in the Talmud is that he was a magician. He's doing all these miracles and using smoke and mirrors and fake things to convince people. And the Jewish magicians of the first century would be ones that actually would work with clay and do that kind of stuff. That's neither here nor there. Just footnote for the back of your mind. So they called the parents. Is this your son who you said was born blind? How is it that he sees? Parents said, we don't know. This is our son who was born blind. Now he sees, we don't know. Who opened his eyes? We don't know. He is of age, ask him. It's almost like, you notice the parents, they're distancing themselves from the child. It's like he's the one that's making these blasphemous claims or these radical claims. We as the parents, we don't have anything to do with them. We're going to distance ourselves. Like, ask him. We don't have anything to do with it there. All right. Verse 22. His parents said this because they were afraid of who?
The Jews.
Okay. His parents were what ethnicity? Jews. Okay. Why? Because the Jews had already agreed if anyone confessed him to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Okay. And this is the first instance where you get a real deep window into what's going on with the Johannine community. You've got people that are confessing Jesus to be the Christ, and the Pharisees, the Jews, are kicking them out of the synagogue. And some people are like, well, even if it's their own family, we don't have anything to do with those people. There's synagogue expulsion. And as we continue reading this, you'll see some more points of it there. So of course they're asking, he's of age, ask him, verse 23. The second time they say, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. Jesus again is called a man. And the guy that was healed, whether he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know, that I was blind, now I see. And there's a double meaning in there, obviously. So they said, this is the Jews, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I already told you, and you do not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You do not want to become his disciples too, do you? And the answer there is obviously
Resounding.
no. Resounding no. Let me see. Can help if I'm in the right chapter. Yeah. It even uses the particle me, which implies a negative answer. Obviously they don't. They reviled him, they slandered him, and they said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. From their perspective, it's one or the other. Follow Moses, Judaism, or you follow Jesus, which has nothing to do with Moses and Judaism. We know, verse 29, that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, Jesus, we do not know where he is from. Jesus says he's from God, we don't know where he's from. But you're going to get this we language there, the we language of the Jews. The man answered, well, here's an amazing thing. You don't know where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know, this is the blind man speaking. He says we, again, speaking on behalf of the Johannine community. If anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him, God hears him. Since the beginning of time, It has never been heard that anyone has opened the eyes of a person blind. That's kind of crazy, I think. If this man, Jesus, called a man, were not from God, he could do nothing. So the whole argument is whether Jesus, who is a man, which everyone agrees with, even his opponents agree with that, it's whether he's from God or not, whether he's legitimately the Messiah, whether he's really God's agent. They're like, well, you were just born in your sins, and you're teaching us, and they put him out. They put him out of the synagogue. Now, what happens after he's put out of the synagogue? Who comes and finds him? Jesus, okay? He finds him, and he asks him the question, do you believe in the Son of Man? The Messiah. Do you believe in the one who's coming one day to judge the world and establish the kingdom on this earth? Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? You both see him, and he is the one talking to you. He believes, and he worships him as the Son of Man, as the King, as the Messiah, the judge, basically. Judgment has come into this world as the Son of Man. Notice, coming into the world, has been brought in. So those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. There's a double meaning there. Pharisees who said, we're not blind also, are we? Implying a negative answer. If you were blind, you would have no sin, but since you say, we see, your sin remains. The comforting thing about a passage like this, to someone in the first century who was a Jewish person, who confessed Jesus as the Messiah, believed the gospel, and was kicked out, the comforting thing is that Jesus would embrace him outside of the synagogue. Those who are expelled from the synagogue will be found by Jesus, and that's a comforting application that they would have taken from this. And so you get this sense to where it's not just objective history, there's something deeper going on that, if you were a Johannine Christian and you wanted to write to comfort people that were being kicked out of the synagogue because they're rightly accepting Jesus, a chapter like this would comfort them and give them lots of application. Do you see how that is? Do you see? Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure there's lots of other little tiny points that you can make out of there. Does anyone have any other questions? Or
I have two things. One is the parallel between Naaman and him going washing his eyes. Anything there, and then also I've heard the analogy over the years how godlike, God formed man out of the dust of the earth, and then Jesus takes the dirt and makes an eyeball. And, you know what I mean?
Okay,
so the godlikeness of that creative miracle.
Okay, let's explain. The first question about Naaman, I don't think there's the text doesn't make any kind of parallel to where when I think the text wants to make an implication, it does. Like it'll usually give like one little hint, and you got to pay attention to it or you'll miss it. But I haven't seen anything in there at all.
I didn't see anything, but I thought there was, very
that's fair. I understand that. I see the references to light of the world, Siloam, washing, all those things have to do with the Tabernacles festival. The fact that he's deliberately healing someone on the Sabbath and deliberately breaking one of the rules that they know, I see that as very deliberate. The double meaning of blind and seeing, the Pharisees, they think that they see, but really they're blind, and therefore they're still in their sin. So I think those things are a little bit are important. Let's look at that word for kneading. 9:6. It's probably somewhat rare. All right. He said to this. He spat on the ground and he made. That's just the verb to make. It's just nothing too special. Where did he use it again?
14.
Right there. Okay. 14. And he made again. Yeah, just PAO. The only thing that, in the Septuagint, Genesis 1:1 says God made the heavens and the earth.
Well, I guess that would be, for me, the answer would be maybe that's one of the works of the Father.
Yeah.
That he has, God says, okay,
Yeah, and I will tell you this, if you go and you look at the Hebrew of Genesis 1:2 really closely, it's not that God, there's absolutely nothing that's out there, and God just kind of creates it out of nothing. He actually takes something that was chaos and void, and it's just like, it's almost like, I dumped out all these markers here. What God did is he took them and he ordered them into something and he fashioned it like this. That's actually the sense of what the verbs mean, is that God brought peace from chaos. So it's not, you can make some sort of application about light there, but I don't think the text makes it. I mean, you maybe could do something in a sermon with it, but so I just, I looked at it. I don't see a connection there with the Septuagint or anything. And nothing I've read seen that. I mean, how many times was Jesus called a man in that verse or in that passage? 11, 16 twice, verse 24, verse 29, and verse 33. There's nothing in there about God at all. I mean, the closest someone ever got called to calling God is when the blind man said, "I am he." That's a joke. So. Yep. Yeah. Go my ego. All right. Does this all make sense right here? The different ways that Judaism was understood? That's not really spelled out to you in the New Testament. You have to kind of put it together by reading stuff. But I think that helps to see what Jesus is doing in his ministry is he's going around and saying, I'm the true way of being Israel. All the other ways are wrong. So repentance doesn't just mean turn from your sins. It means stop being Israel your way and start doing it my way. Why do you think he calls 12 disciples and not 5 or 11 or 22? 12 is the new Israel. He's forming Israel around himself.
Of all those sects, though, which one, other than the disciples of Jesus, which one was who you just said was close?
Close?
Was it Essenes? Was it?
What do you mean close?
As far as their, conceptualization of the Messiah, who Jesus was, or even God.
Well, let's go down the list. We have very few references to the Pharisees, or like their own writings. Like, how do you know what
Right.
If I want to know what you believe, I want to get it from your writings. Do I want to get it from what your opponents say about you? It's likely that they're going to kind of bend your words and not be as fair. Okay, so I'm going to try to get it from your writings. What do we have from the Pharisees? Well, we have some stuff in the Mishnah. We have the writings of Paul. And we have stuff from Josephus, and that's about it. And there's another work, a pseudepigraphal work, called the Psalms of Solomon that some people think was written by Pharisees. So we have some good evidence on that. And they believed a lot of stuff like what Paul believed. Messiah wasn't going to die. He was going to come and bring the kingdom and destroy everyone else. And, basic Old Testament stuff. The Sadducees, they have no writings left over. They didn't leave us any writings. So we have to figure out what they believe by what other people said about them, which you always have to kind of interpret, very carefully. And it's difficult to see. I don't think they say too much about it. The Essenes say a lot. The Essenes say he's going to come and fight the battle. They actually believe in two messiahs. They believe in a kingly messiah, and they believe in a priesthood messiah, based on a passage from Zechariah, which can be interpreted as there's going to be one or two messiahs. It's neither here nor there. What's the next group? The Zealots. It's hard because some of the Pharisees were zealots. Paul was obviously a zealot when he's going around killing Christians. But some of the zealots were not Pharisees, and so they particularly leave their own writings there. John the Baptist, John the Baptist, when he gets thrown into prison, he's writing a letter to Jesus, or he's sending the disciples saying, are you the one that we're expecting, or should we wait for someone else? Even he doesn't quite have it figured out yet. So, that's the best I can give you with all the evidence that's there.
Okay.
But
I'm curious if any of them were actually, embraced.
Yeah, I tell you, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a reference here. Is in 1 QS 2:11. It says that God will beget the Messiah. God will beget the Messiah. So they believe that God would create the Messiah. They didn't believe in any kind of pre-existence, like he was going to bring him about. That's in 1 QS 2:11. So, I remember when I found that one, I was like, yes. Yes.
So maybe the Essenes were.
So, some people think John the Baptist was one. They lived in the wilderness. John the Baptist came out in the wilderness.
Okay.
Anyway, all right. None of this is going to be on the test. This is all just stuff you wouldn't get in, I don't know, finance or aerobic dance or whatever classes we take. All right, 3 applications from the blind man's story. These should be easy.
I am the light of the world.
What?
I am the light of the world.
Light of the world, okay. How do you make that applicable?
Just you know, you can make it applicable, you know, for the, you know, truth, for seeing the truth, and
Okay.
it comes from going from darkness to light. You know, if we read
Truth.
the
Darkness. I've done a fair bit of preaching. I probably preached like 300 sermons and about 1,000 Bible studies. You don't just get up there to talk about your favorite passage. You figure out what do you want the people to walk away with thinking and doing differently. So you think of the application. If you don't have an application, then you don't need to be preaching on topic. So this is what I'm asking, like, how can we, you know, well, how do you want people to change? I mean, it's not just about doctrine. That's important, and doctrine motivates Christian living. But you always need to think, how do I want these people to change after listening to this? So remember the fact that in a sermon, people are going to forget 90% of what you said after you walk out the door. So how can you control what 10% they're going to believe and listen to and remember? So, what else? How about this? According to Jesus, humans are more important than ritual. The value of human beings are more important than literal Sabbath observance. Think that'll preach? How many Christians put ritual over the needs of human beings? I mean, you know, there needs to be a balance, obviously, but Jesus was always interpreting things to where we need to be taking care of people's needs. Why do you think Jesus would, you know, healed all these people on the Sabbath? That's more important.
Maybe you can make an application to family, what Jesus said about, you know, how your family will reject you, and in this case, you kind of set an example.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you think that has a meaning for the Johannine community and the people joining it in the first century? Okay, I think it does. Family, you put redefined by Jesus, not just Jesus, by his identity.
About kind of how Jesus asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Tell me about him and I will." And he believed.
Yeah.
Whereas the Pharisees, Jesus has been talking about the whole time, and they still don't believe.
Yeah. So it's like a childlike faith, like a humility. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you? Like
Yeah,
he just took it for what it is, and
Yeah, and then you could do something for the application is where are you missing Jesus or God in your life that you just don't see it because
okay.
stuff like that.
Do you see whatever it may be? God bless you. Were you gonna say something? I love your expert opinion.
I don't have one of those.
It was just kind of like, well, I mean, he's dealt with the Pharisees over and over again, and we were talking about childlike faith, and he's dealt with this person once. I think we kind of look into it too much. Sometimes, like the Pharisees were.
Yeah.
I mean, one, they didn't want to lose their power because they needed the Messiah. They just kind of let it roam on. But I mean, if you look at, they were looking so far into it that they were not looking at the big scheme of things. They were just trying to pinpoint Jesus and trying to make his falls rather than accept him like this person did. So rather have, you know, it's kind of like faith, not like faith.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with big picture. No. It is interesting that believing in the Son of Man, you couldn't have any kind of belief in him without knowing who he is. You know, John 3:16, you know, believing in Jesus, you got to know who he is too. Like, you want to know who it is. Who is he, Lord? Who is he that I may believe in him? What is the identity of that person? So, I mean, John's gospel is obviously clear. The identity of Jesus is extremely important. So, all right. So next time we meet, which is in 2 weeks, what is due?
The summaries of
Summaries of the
verses.
2 pages.